Welcome to the Two Who's Review Christmas special. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and fittingly, we are talking about the Christmas invasion today. It's the first Christmas special of the modern era, and it's David Tennant's first episode as the Doctor. Um, there's a lot that this episode has to do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, more than anything, it has to reassure a 2005 audience that the show is in good hands without Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, a bit of a tall order because, as we've discussed previously with the last season, he was definitely one of the best parts of that season.
Yeah,
Um, like even beyond, normally good performances, like he really carried the emotions of that show, especially because it was quite a sort of a doctor-centric season.
yeah.
Um, so having big shoes to fill, I think, is a fitting way of putting it.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I'll put this out there real quick.
Mm.
We haven't talked about how we feel about this episode specifically yet, but this would set up a trend of Christmas specials that would happen even if there wasn't a regular season that year. The Christmas special would be a constant
Mm.
until 2000 and I want to say 17 with Twice Upon a Time, which was the last Christmas special.
Mm.
Um, I'm gonna put this out there. Is this the best Christmas special?
Um, maybe. I mean, unless there's any that you can think of.
I can't. I honestly, after this, the majority of Christmas specials are fine or bad.
Because what's the next Christmas special? It's
It's the
not.
Runaway Bride.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which is. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it. I liked Runaway Bride. It's a fun one, but it's certainly not as good as this.
Yeah, I mean, also,
Um,
there's been some Doctor Who news recently. Russell T Davies is bringing back Christmas
mm,
specials with
mm.
his new run, which is a piece of news that was completely irrelevant but made heaps of people happy for no reason. Like, I get that it became kind of a tradition to watch the Doctor Who Christmas special with your family, but like the absence of Christmas specials isn't what made the show bad.
Yeah. No, of course not. And I think the principle of giving us a break from that was actually a pretty decent idea. It's just a shame, just the potential of the new stories they could have told kind of got wasted because it's in the Chibnall era, and
Yeah,
we've complained enough about the Chibnall era.
we
But
have. Yeah,
but yeah, it's a shame that it wasn't um that the break in with that tradition wasn't in better hands.
yeah,
Because I think, like you said, like the Christmas specials, they're fun. They're a nice thing to look forward to every year, and it's interesting to see, what Doctor Who can do with them. But you know, you wonder, like, after so many years, does it get a bit stale?
yeah. Well, I
Um,
mean, especially because like they seem to be running out of pretenses to justify it being a Christmas special, because like you
mm.
end up with episodes like well, the prime example is the Return of Doctor Mysterio, which is a superhero
I
story.
was gonna say that, yeah, that was a Christmas special, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think well,
Okay.
the Christmas specials are kind of an excuse for the show to get a bit more wacky, because you can justify it by
Mm.
going, well, it's just a Christmas special. Like it doesn't really, it's meant to
Yeah.
be just a bit of fun. So you can do
Mm.
stuff like creating a Doctor Who superhero, or
Mm.
having Greg Davies stomp around in a big giant robot mech.
Mm.
Because it's a Christmas special and they're meant to be light and upbeat and stuff like that, and that's how you can
Mm.
get away with doing stuff like that. But it does mean that the special becomes less about Christmas and more about like just being a Doctor Who episode that is slightly more unhinged because it is December.
Well, yeah, and you even see this in this episode. They don't like it. Certainly doesn't go, I think, too far. But
No,
flame throwing, trumpet playing Santas, and killer Christmas trees. I mean, granted, we've seen wackier stuff in Doctor Who
We
before,
have,
but
yeah.
this, as you say, I think because it's Christmas, I think there's a temptation to say, yeah, how unhinged can we make this? You know,
Yeah.
how far can we push it? Um, it's fortunate though that with this story, RTD, he's not asking that question too much because
Yeah.
the wackiest stuff happens in like the first, I'd say
10
the first like
minutes.
20 minutes, yeah. With again killer flamethrowing Santas and killer Christmas trees. After that, it's basically just well, no, not a standard invasion story because it's fairly Doctor Light and we've got some neat character moments. But the point is, it moves beyond the confines of simply its premise because I think uh, there is a temptation with stories like this to kind of get lost in the novelty, saying,
Yeah.
okay, well, yeah, how wacky can we make this, and then forgetting, oh, we're telling a story here, and
Well,
it's the first episode of this Doctor, and we need to be
yeah.
setting up character
I mean,
arcs.
I'll put this out there. Like the first 10 minutes are very wacky. That's when we get the robot Santas, and that's when we
Mm,
get the
mm.
Christmas tree. I was surprised that the Christmas tree comes in at around the 10-minute mark actually, because when I remember I was watching it last night, and I looked at the timestamp and around that point, and I was like, "What? Really? This happens that early?" But after
Hmm.
that point, like when it actually reaches Christmas Day, it gets really, really dark. Um,
Yeah, it's pretty serious.
yeah, and like some would say, like they're doing the whole blood control plot. Like, well, why does
Mm.
that fit in at Christmas? Well, because it is kind of the scariest possible Christmas Day scenario. Like, it's meant to be a day about being with family and
Yeah,
and then to have a third of your family kind of like, well, not a third of your family, but like have people in big
some chunk
family
of your
groups,
family probably
yeah,
going.
like completely mindless and walking up and like threatening to jump
Mm.
off a building. Like that's very scary and
Yeah, that would not be a good Christmas lunch. That'd
no,
be
absolutely not.
pretty pretty horrifying. Um,
Before we
yes.
get
So,
too deep, we
so
should get
yeah.
into the timescales rankings.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, out of 225 votes, this episode has a rating of 7.
Um,
Look, it's the kind of thing where it's like, when you just finished watching it, you're like, this is not a 7. But honestly, like, on reflection, I kind of agree. Because, like, there are issues that I'll bring up a bit later on, and it's by
sure,
no
sure.
means a perfect episode.
Hmm.
But, like, I think this episode is remembered largely because of the last 15 minutes when David Tennant is like really active and doing stuff, and that time is really really
Mm,
good. But I
mm-hmm,
think a lot
mm-hmm.
of the moments before that do kind of drag it, and I know it's like it's not the episode's fault. Like that the format works, and we'll talk about it. But
Yeah, yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of the memorable stuff is in that last 15 minutes, and a lot of the other stuff beforehand is kind of standard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from. I feel like I'd probably put it a bit higher than a 7. I am, admittedly, as you say, sort of going off that initial reaction. I mean, I have watched it twice in the last couple of weeks, but it is that kind of visceral shock of like, oh man, we're still getting good Doctor Who. That's great, and
Yeah,
this new Doctor, he's fantastic. But there's even for me, even before that, I like a lot of the character interactions. I really love Harriet Jones in this story.
yeah, definitely.
She's really really compelling. Um, and the way, even the management of tone, the fact that you've got that bit where she's giving the Queen's address, and she's like, "Oh, where are they? Oh, they're on the roof," and it's like there's something almost funny about that, but like
Yeah,
then you realize, oh wait, this is really, really profoundly disturbing.
yeah, it's bleak.
Um, so I certainly admire it for doing that, but you could argue that apart from that last 15 minutes, maybe this is a story that's kind of more admirable than it is totally sort of cohesive.
Yeah,
Simply because again, it had such huge shoes to fill, um, and it also has quite a lot to set up with the following seasons.
yeah.
I mean, granted, obviously, it's easy to say that in hindsight, but the point is, it's doing a lot
Mm.
and doing it admirably well. But and we'll obviously get into this, but as you say, I wonder, is it all coming together as much as the writers want it to?
Yeah, yeah. Um, in terms of overall rankings in the Tenant era, this falls around the middle, which makes a lot of sense. There are better episodes with Tennant than this. There are worse
Mm.
episodes
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Tennant than this. I don't really have much to say about that. There's a 6.9 for plot, which again I think is pretty fair. It is by its own admission a pretty standard plot because it has so much to do otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar thing with Rose, I think, where it's like if you make the
Mm.
plot too complicated, it detracts from the stuff that the episode needs to
Yeah.
do.
Mm-hmm.
8 for acting. Yep, everyone's good in
Yeah.
this. I don't think anyone's putting in a bad performance. There are a couple of background actors that I think go a bit too far or a bit over the top with it. But apart from that, everyone's good. David Tennant gives a good first impression, a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good first impression, actually. Like, I forget how good he is in this.
Mm. Yeah, I can't think of any, certainly no major flaws with the performances. Even some of the smaller characters are really, they're being dedicated, and it
Yeah.
feels good. And even the sicker acts, they're doing sort of the classic over the top Doctor Who villain, but they're doing it really well.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's all exciting and good fun. So yeah.
Uh, 7.2 for effects, I agree. Anytime that computer graphics are used, it stands out quite a lot,
Hmm.
and it's not that impressive to the point where, and I hate when it's mainly stuff from the mid 2000s that does this, but like people always say that the sweet spot is a mix of practical and computer graphics. I
Hmm.
think that there was a point around the mid 2000s where they sort of got took the wrong idea from that. And the best example of that is when the TARDIS is crashing at the beginning, where in
Mm-hmm.
some shots it's fully computer animated, but there is one
Hmm.
shot when Mickey and Jackie have to duck where you can tell it is practical, and
Hmm.
it kind of makes it stand out a lot more
Mm-hmm.
because, like,
Mm-hmm.
it is so obviously computer graphics, and then when you suddenly switch to practical, it does kind of take you out of the immersion. Whereas I think
Mm-hmm.
if it was fully computer graphics for the entire scene, I think it would have been less noticeably bad. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if
Yeah, it
that.
would have been. No, no, no. I definitely see what you mean. Because if you see a CGI effect, and even if your brain is registering, oh, that doesn't look great, like once you get used to the shock of okay, this is what it looks like, it's far less jarring to have it be consistent, than to have it switch to practical effects. And it's funny you say that this is a trend that sort of cropped up in the mid 2000s, but I'd even go so far as to say, certainly, like even just sticking with the BBC, it goes back to Walking with Dinosaurs. When
Oh
the
yeah,
bit with the Christmas tree, you can clearly tell when it's CGI, and then the weird, pretty actually cool close-ups from like
the tree's
inside the
perspective.
tree, where you
Yeah,
can tell that's practical effects. But I was reminded very much of a lot of scenes in Walking with Dinosaurs. We can clearly tell that they're mixing pretty decent practical effects with this kind of pretty innovative but not great CG.
yeah,
And that only in a way got kind of more sort of frustrating with Walking with Beasts because they have to animate fur, which is a whole other
oh yeah.
situation.
God,
But yeah, I think I definitely see what you mean there. That it can be jarring. It didn't bother me too much.
no, no,
I think
and
I
they're
just think,
like the
okay, it's Doctor
majority
Who,
of
whatever.
yeah, and the majority of it is done practically.
Yeah.
It's apart from like some space shots, the majority of the stuff in this episode, like the computer graphics are reserved for sort of background work. Like the scene in the
Hmm.
Sycorax spaceship, you can tell they're not in a cavern. Like there's clearly
Yeah,
a
yeah,
set with like
yeah.
green screen stuff in the background, but it works well enough there. Like it's an illusion that largely holds up.
Yeah, yeah, and even when the Doctor and the leader are fighting, like the sky, like it's obviously CG, and the sky is clearly CG, but that works fine enough. It must be said, I think you can kind of tell a good deal of the special effects budget has gone to the Sycorax makeup, but it
Yeah,
does look really, really great.
it
Like
does.
that's
Yeah,
and it's good because I think Doctor Who gets a lot of flack for having bad even practical effects, particularly in the classic series. So to kind of see this really great, sort of icky looking practical makeup effect for the head, it just is it's so great just to
yeah,
to to see it.
and like
So I think
there's also
they
like really
deserve kudos
small.
for that.
There's also really small things like the design of the Sycorax spaceship is really interesting. The way it's built like a mountain almost. But then it's like
Yeah.
when you think about it, it's like, oh, they only designed it that way so that they could have a fight on top of the spaceship and they could just film in any quarry again. You know?
I'm not sure where they would have filmed. I mean, they probably would have filmed it at the quarry, but
Yeah.
that would if I find that out, like if that's true, I will be very entertained by that because that's just carrying on the tradition. But yeah, that wouldn't surprise me that it's meant to be. Yeah, we'll just get any sort of vaguely barren, rocky place and we'll just put it there. I mean, kudos for them, I guess. I mean, maybe the idea is that the Sycorax are kind of trying to disguise themselves as a floating object in space, but anyway, it works. It works fine enough.
It's fine, yeah. And also a replay value of 7. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, it is a first Doctor episode, so you kind of need to rewatch those. But I mean, nothing about this episode falls apart on a rewatch. There's no
Yeah,
glaring
yeah.
plot holes that arise. There's nothing that contradicts itself or previous episodes. It holds up pretty well on a rewatch, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. It part of me is comparing it to, how did I feel the first time seeing this episode way back in the naive year of 2006. And obviously it's not as like super exciting back then. I guess that's just the nostalgia goggles rearing their head. But it was still pretty good, and I feel like I know that my perception of it is probably swayed a lot by those last 15 minutes because they are really, really good.
Yeah,
But even overall, I thought it was pretty great. I really like the idea of the fact that uh, you know, Rose can't understand what the Sycorax is saying until the Doctor, you know,
wakes up.
yeah, wakes up. I think that it's a small detail, but it's just a fun little um, signal that things are even more dire than perhaps we thought they were.
Yeah.
And I like little details like that. They resonate with me quite a lot. So yeah, I'd say probably not as good as as how I remember it being when I was a kid, but still pretty good.
73 out of 113 people say this requires a previous story. I think on more than a few points, you do have to have seen previous episodes. The
Mm.
Harriet Jones stuff isn't nearly as impactful if you don't already know who she is and who.
Yeah.
If you haven't had that previous adventure with Harriet, her ending isn't nearly as uh, it doesn't resonate nearly as well
No.
because otherwise you're just seeing a
No.
new character basically. Uh,
Yeah.
and also you kind of need to have a sense of who the Doctor is because it doesn't really touch on it that like this will be a bad first episode. I think like there are some people who say skip the Eccleston stuff and jump straight to Tennant. I could not
No.
disagree more than that. This is a
No. You
bad
can't.
episode to start out with because it doesn't explain anything about the world or the
Mm.
Doctor himself. Like it tries and it does like little things, but it doesn't do it nearly as well as
And
Chris
and
Eccleston's first
even
episode does.
and even when they do, there are a lot of this is a small thing, but there were a lot of bits of dialogue in the story that did kind of annoy me, because a lot of it is very, um, you know, tell over show. It's
Yeah,
like there's that bit where Mickey and Rose are talking to each other. It's like, oh, yeah, I love hearing stories about the Doctor. Please tell me more stories about the Doctor. Remember when the Doctor and you did this? Oh boy, it's very like little things like that. It's
yeah,
clearly using these small bits of exposition to take care of the fact that um
yeah.
this
In that example, you need to have watched series 1 to know that Rose is a terrible boyfriend to Mickey. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
like
Girlfriend to Mickey. Sorry.
it's it like just whole little bits like that. Even when Rose says, "Oh yeah, I stopped World War III with her," like
Yeah,
you can see what it's trying to do. It's trying to
yeah,
hook in new viewers by giving them enough information. But as you say, unless you see Aliens of London World War III, you're not going to get a remotely good enough picture of Harriet
yeah.
Jones and who she is. And you
And I think
need
that
that. It's so important for
well,
that
I think
ending plot point.
yeah. Well, also like a lot of First Doctor stories are kind of designed to be jumping on points for new viewers because
Mm,
there's always going to be someone who goes, "Oh, I haven't seen Doctor Who before, but I really liked the thick of it, and now this Capaldi guy is the lead in that. I might check it out now. So they kind of always need to sort of structure the first episode of a new Doctor as if it will be someone's first time watching. But I think in this scenario, because the new series was so fresh and it had only like it had started in April of the same year, so I don't think very many people were jumping onto this with the Christmas special. I think the majority of people had been watching it from 2005 because it was new. I think it has to it has less to do to introduce new viewers. Like, because I'm thinking about it, the Matt Smith first episode easily is designed to be a jumping on point. Whittaker's first episode, yes, 100% is designed that way as well. Capaldi's first episode, to some extent, yes, to some extent, no. Eccleston's first episode, obviously. I can't speak for classic Doctor's first stories because I think those are a different kettle of fish. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
think it can vary from time to time. I think they were less dedicated back then into deliberately introducing new audiences.
yeah,
Again, it varies. Like things like Spearhead from Space is a bit like that. I think that's partly because the plot was the Doctor was exiled, and at that point, the Time Lords had I think they'd implanted like false memories, so he thought he was human, which
right.
is an interesting thing. But even with Patrick Trout and his first story, which was Power of the Daleks, which unfortunately is lost now, but I've got the audio of it. Even then, they do, especially given that was the first regeneration, they do a pretty good job at introducing it. It makes sense that they would go with the Daleks because they are, the big, Doctor Who baddie.
Yeah.
But I think with the revival series, for one reason or another, there's more of a concerted effort to introduce new audiences
Well,
to a Doctor.
I think it's because it's a different season structure, right? Because like the classic series, a Doctor could regenerate just whenever. With the new series, it is kind of like the Doctor will always regenerate either at the end of a season or in a special episode that leads into a new season. Like my example would be the fifth Doctor regenerates in Caves of Androzani. Then next week it's a Twin Dilemma, and then that's the end of that season of television. Like it's a weird. In my mind, it's a weird place to put your regeneration right before the final story of a season. So, it's weird to do that to reintroduce the Doctor and the show in the final story of a season when you've got a new season coming up next year. That was then and this is now. I think we should just get into it, I guess.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm watching this episode last night and
Oh,
I'm
so are
what
we gonna do a description of the plot, or are we just gonna?
I've found that haven't been doing that for the classics. I mean, for the revived era, at all. Largely because
Oh right,
the
yeah,
synopses that I get are bad for the revived stories.
yeah, aren't they like weirdly short and
They're
then
either
not?
weirdly short or they focus on the wrong things. Like for
Fair
example,
enough.
here there's a whole point about her mother Jackie being happy to see Rose, and having the tea, but it doesn't really comment on the Sycorax or the blood control stuff. Whereas with the classic series stuff, since they're pulled directly from the BBC website, they tend to do a better job of recapping the story. And also because I feel like, for the most part, people who are watching this will have seen. It's more likely they'll have seen the revived
Yeah,
episodes
sure.
than random classic stories. So
Sure.
I've been tending to read out the synopsis for them, but not so much for the revival.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but anyway, back to what I was saying. I was watching this last night, and I was mentioning how like the first part of the episode, the first 10 minutes or so, is kind of lighthearted and wacky and a little ridiculous with the robot Santas in the Christmas tree. And I'm watching that and I'm thinking, wow, this like, does any of this have anything to do with the actual plot? Because when you think about it, like the Doctor very briefly says why the pilot fish, as he calls them, are there. They picked up the Doctor's energy when he was sort of leaking it, and he was like, they were like, oh, that's a battery. We can use the Doctor's energy to fuel our ship for years. And then their plot ends up being about selling the human race into slavery. Like those things don't really connect. You know what I
Um,
mean? And also because the robot Santas show up again in Runaway Bride, and the Sycorax don't, it does kind of make the beginning of the episode feel weirdly disjointed when compared to the
mm,
actual Sycorax story. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, sure. Um, yeah, I can understand that because you again, as you said, it's the that temptation to be wacky because it's Christmas time. What can we do here? But as you say, how sort of cohesively that does that sort of fit in? You wonder, like logically, why wouldn't they just go with energy getting released, Sycorax invading? Like, yeah, the
Yeah.
pilot fish and by the way, was it ever? It's never really like explicitly explained where the Christmas tree came from. Is it like you assume that it's from the Sycorax or the pilot fish, but you never really find out. It's just
Yeah,
kind of
they don't say who did
there,
it. Well, I mean,
which is
it's I think it's implied that it's the Santas because we see one of the Santas with the remote control for the tree, right?
oh okay, yeah, yeah, fair enough.
But like
But yeah,
that being
that
said, it means like so their plan was to you know it does make you wonder like if the robot Santas are from the Sycorax, how do they have such extensive knowledge of Earth Christmas?
yeah, especially
Where they would know to place a weapon in the Tyler household disguised as a tree. But also, like, if they have, oh no, never mind, because it was delivered to the door. They didn't actually drop it inside. I was about to say
mm,
if they put the tree in the house, why not just take the doctor there and then? But
mm,
that's not what they did.
no,
Um, yeah,
it
and
is yeah, it's a little weird when
also
you sort of
if
break
you've
it down.
already got the tree weapon in the Tyler household, why bother ambushing them on the street? Because surely that would tip them off that something's wrong, right? Because that's how they figure out
Mm,
that the tree is is something nasty because they've already had that encounter with the robot Santas. If they just rocked up and had gone, oh, new tree, they probably
mm,
wouldn't have even given it a second thought. But because they're
mm.
already in that mindset, it's kind of like you kind of tipped your hand too early for a plot
Yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't impact the rest of the story at all. The only purpose that it has in the narrative is to wake the Doctor up briefly at the start of the episode
Mm,
to keep the viewer engaged when he's not in the majority of the rest of it. You know what I
mm.
mean? Like, because if
Yep,
there
sure.
is a danger, because I understand what Russell T Davies is doing in this, and I know, in a way, I really kind of applaud it. Where
Mm.
it's a new episode of a new Doctor. Having the Doctor in the episode as little as possible is bold, and it also
It
it
is.
builds up their when they actually do appear finally completely realized. And the build up is great, and the moment itself is really cool. But you do kind of need a moment early on so that people don't just turn it off and go, "Well, hang on a minute, we were promised a new Doctor. Where's the new Doctor?" You know?
Mm. Yeah. No, no, no. That's a good point. I think ultimately this is and it's a thing which happens repeatedly in the classic series, more so I'd argue than in the revival, where they are kind of going for spectacle over story.
Yeah,
Now, I'm sure I've touched on this before. That strategy works better in some cases than others. It worked surprisingly well in the chase, because as we said, like there are a lot of bits in that story that don't make total narrative sense, but I think, as even you said, you couldn't get rid of any of them because they are so entertaining and
yeah,
kind of crazy. You have to go along. It's quite literally the thrill of the chase. You have to kind of
yes,
just go along with it. Um, but here, you can tell that it's not just a sci-fi romp, especially really again in the whole episode. Apart from that first 10 minutes, it gets pretty serious and
yeah,
there's real emotional stakes. So that you've just got this kind of again weird, wacky Christmas time sci-fi romp in the first 10 minutes, and it's kind of like it's part of the plot, like it makes sense, but it's not gelling with it as cohesively as it could be. And as I said, I'm not too bothered when I see stuff like that, and I think that bold, wacky spectacle and all of the sort of creative risks that are involved with that, it's kind of what Doctor Who does best. But of course, the problem is if you're going to go with that strategy, you have to be careful how you deploy it, because if you're
Yeah.
trying to tell like a really like serious story and introduce a new Doctor and do all these things, you if when you take risks like that, they don't always pay off, and I think that's probably what's happened here. So, flame throwing, trumpet playing Santas, and crazy Christmas trees. Great, cool stuff. Love watching it, and it's probably fun for the kids. Thinking, oh, what kill a Santa? That's freaky. What's happening, people? But it doesn't fit together as well as perhaps the writers are thinking. Or maybe RTD thought, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't working together as well as many would want, but I'm still going to put it in there. And fair enough. But
Yeah.
the point is, as you say, these are not. They don't hurt the plot terribly, but they're certainly not unignorable.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you mentioned that the episode isn't really a sci-fi romp in that it gets kind of dark.
mm,
But it is in a way. I do kind of applaud the episode for what it does because it kind of is what it says on the tin. The Christmas invasion. It is kind of a
mm,
standard invasion story
mm,
at Christmas. But the thing that
mm,
sets it apart is really just because there is no Doctor there, and
mm,
that is sort of encapsulated with how easily the Doctor resolves the conflict as soon as he is awake. Where it's kind of
mm,
like, well, if the Doctor had been there the whole time, it would not be as nearly as bad as it was. But because there is no Doctor, we sort of get to see, you know, the stakes are built up dramatically, and the Sycorax are made much more formidable as villains because of the lack of the Doctor. Now, the
mm.
downside to that being when the Doctor is awake, the Sycorax are kind of a joke, and they're not really as memorable a villain
Yeah.
after that as they
Mm,
were before that point. It means we get to see. I do like that we see units kind of piecing together the the Sycorax's plan and working it out on their own. I do like that because it does kind of show.
mm,
Okay, we wouldn't be completely lost. We would still be able to figure this
mm.
stuff out. We are intelligent. It's just that there's nothing we can
And
do about it.
and Torchwood is a thing, so
Torchwood is a thing. Yeah, it's the first time we
mm.
see them beyond a throwaway Easter egg in Bad Wolf, and it
Is
doesn't.
actually that reminds me, had Torchwood started by this point?
Oh, definitely
Because
not.
I thought it
No,
started.
Torchwood was 2007 because like the whole
Oh,
point of Torchwood is it was picking up the pieces after the fall of Torchwood at Canary Wharf in the season 2 finale.
okay. I was
You know,
gonna say because
it
I
goes
thought.
Torchwood goes from being this big government organization to kind of an underground, operation.
Okay, right. Because I thought, yeah, I thought it started in 2006, but clearly I'm mistaken there.
If
Um.
it started in 2006, it definitely started after Series 2 aired.
Okay, cool. But yeah, it's and as I say, like yeah, Torchwood, it's a thing. So as you've said, the Earth is completely defenseless.
Yeah,
Um, but it's kind of good in a way in terms of introducing a new Doctor because it shows how important the Doctor is, but in
yeah.
like quite a practical way. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that there's historically been a temptation to over mythologize the Doctor. I mean, I've complained about that before,
Well,
but it
that's interesting.
hmm,
I Before you continue, I would like to read out to you
sure.
a review of this episode from the timescales that has a 3 out of 10 rating.
Oof,
Um, and
please.
I'm gonna read the first uh, bulk of the review because I'm interested to hear what you think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when people bang on about how Moffat thinks the Doctor is so great and he's the center of the universe, you know how it makes very little sense if you watch the show? Well, witness that phenomenon actually happening here. The Christmas invasion collapses into nothing the moment Tennant takes a nap, and then the moment he wakes up, RTD turns on the cheeky chappy dialogue switch, and suddenly it's all about the thoroughly unlikable, unproven Ten. Knowing how good Ten eventually becomes, and how much he is retroactively justified, salvages this dumpster fire from the depths. Now, I don't
Ooh,
agree with a lot of that.
brutal.
I don't agree with a lot of that. But there are aspects of it where I'm like, I can't say that they're entirely wrong
Mm.
because
Mm.
it is kind of like without the Doctor we're all lost, and that's especially encapsulated with Rose, who I cannot
Mm.
stand in this episode.
Yeah,
You
I
know how
was
I've
gonna
been,
say
you
I
know how I've been
watched.
saying. Sorry, before you
No,
jump
it's
in.
okay. No, go ahead.
You know how I've been saying for a long time during series one, I have two major problems with Rose. One
Mm,
of which is encapsulated in series one with how she treats the people around her. The
mm,
second issue starts to crop up here, and that's her
mm.
codependency. Because from her
Yeah.
perspective, literally the previous day, she was going on about how the doctor showed me a better way of living your life. You don't just give up, you make a stand. But now, she's crying because her man isn't around, and that without him, there's nothing we can do. She's moping and
Mm,
sulking and being snarky and treating
mm,
Jackie badly for trying to get food into the TARDIS, and
mm,
ignoring Mickey and snapping back at him.
mm.
And she says, "When I'm stuck at home, I'm useless." Well, you're useless all the time, Rose. So shut up. Like, oh, do you see what I'm like? It's that complete like. Once again, we've backpedaled. Rose has gone from having character development to having none of it. She's gone from, you know, I'm gonna keep fighting even without the Doctor, which is literally the point of Party of
Mm,
the Ways, where it's like the Doctor's not around, but I can still help out. I'm gonna try and get back there and help. To now,
mm,
without the Doctor, being completely and utterly useless, and crying and whinging about why would he leave me, which is especially hard to hear when literally earlier in the episode you asked for him to help you and he did. He has made it very clear
mm,
that he's not a stranger to what's going on with him. He knows what's going on. He needs time to cook. Basically, he's told
mm.
her this, and yet she still has the audacity to go, "Oh, where he's gone? Why would he leave me? I thought he cared about me." Fuck off.
Um, there are a couple of things there.
Yeah, I imagine there might be.
So admittedly, even when I was watching this episode, it did get to the bit where she's basically crying her eyes out, saying, yeah, he's left me, mum, and I'm like, man, remember that thing that Cuff said about
Mm-hmm.
Rose being codependent? I
Mm-hmm.
assume this is exactly what he meant.
And it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get so much worse.
Um, I don't look, and I don't know if I've ever directly said this before. No, I probably have directly said this before. I understand all of your criticisms about Rose, and you make the argument very well. I don't know if I can completely agree with it. I just, again, I don't know what it is. I don't hate her, certainly on a gut level, in the way that that you do. It's not,
Well, it's even just small stuff. Like
again.
early in the episode,
Mm,
Rose asks Jackie where she got a pair of men's pajamas, and Jackie's like, "Oh, this guy who you may
yeah,
remember."
yeah.
And she's like, "Well," and Rose goes, "Well, what's he doing hanging around?" And then Jackie starts to explain, and Rose immediately ignores her and changes topic. Like that is an incredibly rude thing to do. If someone's telling you something that you've asked them about, for you
Mm,
to then completely like walk away from the room
mm,
literally
mm-hmm.
and change the topic of conversation. It's more of Rose treating the people around her like dirt, basically.
Like disposable.
Yeah,
Excuse
exactly.
me.
And again, this is someone who literally half an hour ago didn't know if you were alive or not. Because remember the last time we saw Jackie?
Mm,
It was like the Rose was going off in the TARDIS. Jackie had helped her do so, and everyone knew that it was dangerous and she might not come back alive. So Jackie has spent the
mm,
last however many months thinking that Rose might be dead, and then she
mm-hmm.
shows up and continues to be dismissive towards her, and I just can't understand, I just can't get around it. I cannot
Mm, mm-hmm.
understand. And look, the main thing with this, one thing I've always said is that the companion is the audience's eyes. The companion
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the point of view character through which we experience the alien and foreign world of Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
So when we see Rose in an episode that introduces a new Doctor crying about the fact the Doctor isn't there anymore, it's like, well, what are we the audience supposed to take away from this? Are we supposed to be on Rose's side? Is the episode trying to
Mm,
turn us away from David Tennant before he's even had a chance to do anything?
mm,
That's my
mm,
weird thing. This is the first of two episodes in the revival era in which a companion goes through regeneration with a Doctor and has to deal with the consequences of that. The second one is 11 to 12, when Clara has to react to Computer Capaldi. And
Mm,
for the beginning of the episode, she's in the same mindset where it's like, can
mm,
we get the Doctor back? What's going on? But then for the rest of
mm,
the episode, she's fine.
mm,
She takes it in a stride. She learns to cope with it. She learns through her own words, basically. I don't know.
mm,
You probably don't remember the episode, but she accidentally gives herself a speech about, nothing's changed. She's still the Doctor, and then from there, she treats him. Apart from like a moment when he acts kind of out of character, she treats
mm,
him just like she's treated the other Doctor, and
mhm,
that's good. That is a good thing to do for the audience, especially if they haven't been through a regeneration before, because it lets us
mm,
know that everything's fine.
mhm,
When
mm.
we see Rose
Sure.
doing stuff like this, it telegraphs to the audience this is not fine, and the Doctor did something to her, because that's what she says.
Mm,
And then when he shows up later on, she doesn't apologize for it.
mm,
She takes
mhm.
it in a stride, and she's like, "Oh, okay." The Doctor winked at me once. I'm on board.
Um,
And you can't argue that because that's what happens in the
yeah,
episode.
yeah, 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 yeah,
She's
yeah.
she's still kind of standoffish towards him when when he's going like, "How do I look? Am I ginger?" And she's still kind of like, yeah, you're different. It's fine."
Mm,
The first time she smiles at him after that is when he winks at her,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's back to superficial once again.
Mm. Um, I think I'll offer a slight counter narrative
Please
to
do, please
this.
do.
It because of all the crazy things that had happened in the previous episode. I wonder whether there is a bit of trauma happening there. You know, she's bonded with this person through really, really difficult circumstances. You know, she had to get the heart of the TARDIS taken out of her head. I mean, God knows what that would have been like after killing the Daleks and being through this insane, misadventure, and then to have that person who who saved her and who, has helped her throughout the season, to have them, seemingly disappear or at least change so radically. I think that would have a big impact on anyone. So I think the fact that
Mm-hmm.
she is that upset is understandable. Now, I will say, however, um, the given that we'd just been through a whole season, and I mean, as you said, there wasn't a lot of character development with Rose, but given there probably should have been a lot of character development with Rose, is this reaction still appropriate given that? Because as you say, like you said with Clara, like she in the end took it in her stride, but that's after. I mean, I'm not sure how long Clara was with the 11th Doctor, but it would have been enough for her to have some character arcs,
Yeah, definitely.
presumably. So yeah, I think just the whole trauma aspect of it, I think, is worth mentioning. I think it
Well,
makes her position a little bit more understandable,
look,
but as you
I
say, you'd expect her to have more character development by this
mm.
point,
Well,
perhaps.
I agree to an extent because there is a line early in the episode where Rose is like, "I thought I knew him. I keep forgetting
Mm,
he's an alien," and that stuff is fine.
mm, mm,
And
sure.
if they had explored that trust issue further, I would agree.
Mm-hmm,
But then after that point, that aspect of it is almost abandoned completely, and it just goes back to her being like, "How could he leave me?" Which isn't the
mm,
same thing.
mm-hmm.
You know, like if she had
Yeah, yeah,
taken a more mature response to it and gone, if what else is he keeping from me?
yeah.
How
He's
could,
not the same person,
yeah, exactly.
Um,
But there's none of that. It's just he's gone. How could he leave me? I want my
yeah,
boyfriend
yeah.
back.
As if, yeah. It's the well, yeah, like you said, she sort of admits, yeah, he's an alien, but then when she starts crying, did she just forget that? Did she just think, oh, yeah, his body completely changed after basically destroying himself? That was a deliberate choice, and he's gone now, and that's not fair. So
Not
yeah,
to mention,
once again, I know I've said this numerous times in these situations. I don't know if I can 100% agree with you, but
well,
certainly you make some pretty solid points here
her behavior
about
is
this.
especially weird if you watch Born Again before this. We haven't really touched on this yet, but there is a Children in Need 8-minute episode that aired in between this and the Christmas special, which sort of
Mm,
fills in the gaps. it's how we get from Barcelona to Christmas, basically. And the Doctor takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time in that explaining to Rose what's going on. You know, he explains,
Right.
I was dying. I'm a Time Lord. I changed who I am, but it's still me. He makes a
Okay.
big point of saying that, and he also reaffirms to her that he's still the same person by recounting his first memory of her. To
Mm-hmm.
then go from that to being like, oh, but he's gone. How could he not
Mm.
explain to me? He did. He did. He did.
I must admit, it is a little weird to have, like, because that's presumably a pretty crucial speech of
It
explaining
is, yeah.
how this whole thing works. It is weird to have that in a weird little special and not in the actual episode. I'm not sure what went on there behind the scenes, but you'd think that that would be part of the
Mm.
story. But
Well, I wonder
then
if
again, if it was in the story, that would make this crying scene even more frustrating
yeah. Well, I
because
wonder if it was originally gonna be the start of the episode, but then when Russell J was writing it, he was like, "This is too long," and then just decided to make it its own thing. Because
mm,
I get that philosophy. Um,
mm,
because it is quite a long conversation that they have, and they do touch on a lot of
mm,
stuff. It's like it's the Doctor sort of like react like sort of feeling up their new body and being like, okay, let's see
mm,
how have I changed. And
mm,
Rose is kind of like hiding for a bit because she assumes that there was like a body swap that happened with like a trans man,
mm,
which is fair enough. A man exploded and turned into another man. I wouldn't
mm,
immediately assume he's changed his physical appearance to stop himself from dying.
mm,
Um, uh, and then they explain he can't go back to the way he was.
mm,
Uh, if you want to go home, I'll cancel Barcelona, and I'll tell you what, I'll drop you home on Christmas. A little treat from me.
mm,
Uh, yeah,
mm,
and then we go from that to the Doctor starting to act a little uncontrollably. They start spasming. It's like, oh, the change is going wrong. I'm not ready yet,
mm,
which leads into when he's acting kind of manic at the start of
mm,
this rather nicely.
mm,
Um, so yeah, there is a lot that goes on in Born Again, and it wouldn't be right sort of tacked onto the start of this. At the very least, if
mm.
it was, you'd have
Sure.
to change a lot of how the episode is structured.
Yeah. Well, that's the curious thing. I wonder if this wasn't a Christmas special, would that have been the first 10, 15 minutes?
Uh,
Um,
I don't know. It's possible.
because as you say, that it doesn't. The fact that the Doctor's energy is what attracts the Sycorax, it doesn't quite gel with the Christmas stuff. So could they have done it that way to make the whole thing fit together? Having said that, as I said, if they did that, the whole Rose crying her eyes out would be even more awkward if
Yep.
we were given explicit explanation as to what this is, and
Yes.
she just kind of had a bit of a moment. Which is very bizarre. And incidentally, that reviewer that you mentioned talked about the mythologizing of the Doctor. I wonder whether that's not a part of it as well, because certainly that's the impression that you get from the scene of Rose crying. It's like, wow, this Doctor must be like a really important, serious person. Ooh, what's happening here? And then when the Doctor comes in and saves the day, it's like, oh, that's why she was crying, because he's like this timey wimey. Oh god, I can't believe I'm saying this. He's almost like a timey wimey Jesus.
Yeah. Um.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean. Yeah. So that review is like I see where they're coming from. I don't agree with
Mm,
the finer
mm,
points because there is
mm.
a three seems harsh. Because like even if
Yeah,
you think that the stuff
yeah.
with David Tennant at the end is like the only good stuff in the episode, the rest of it isn't bad.
Yeah, and there's nothing. I mean, the guy, whoever it was, person mentioned, Moffat and kind of the frustrating elements of his writing, which I, as you can imagine, I quite identified with.
Yeah.
Um, but like, certainly there's nothing, um, no lines, no moments in Tennant's showing up at the end that frustrate me
So that's
almost
interesting. I thought that the
nearly
Lion
as
King
much as
reference. I thought the Lion King reference might have ticked a nerve with you.
it surprisingly didn't.
Yeah, I'm
I
I
don't know
was I
why. I
was
don't know whether it's
sure you
because
were
he
gonna
pauses and is
mention
like,
it.
oh no, that's the Lion King, but um, yeah, I don't know why that didn't bother me as much. Maybe there's a
Well,
bias coming in there. There probably is, but in
yeah.
any case,
While we're here, we might as well finally talk about David Tennant.
yeah, sure, sure.
Um, it's such a great first impression.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he does so well in this. There's a reason he became so beloved in this role. And like I
Mm,
was even noticing the simple things. Like it's really small, but like in the moment when after he picks out his new outfit and he's leaving the TARDIS, the way just even the way he walks, like he has the
mm,
mannerisms already.
mm.
It's so clear that he was a fan of the show before taking the role because
Yeah,
he just knows what the character is and he knows what to do with it.
yeah. He's got that, he's got those great eyebrows, and he's got that sort of weird, semi-quizzical but super serious look to his face. He's got that kind of down pat,
Yeah.
and he knows how to pretty effortlessly combine the whimsy and with the moral seriousness, which, as I've mentioned, is a crucial part, I think, of any great Doctor performance. And it's not just admirable; it is just purely entertaining to see that. And the fact that we talked about the dark tone, and this obviously goes back to the writing as well. But the fact that it does get really dark there when he says, no second chances. That's the kind of man I am. I mean, and the fact that again he's effortlessly able to do that is pretty damn impressive, honestly.
Well, let's also not
Um,
forget like he it's something that doesn't get discussed enough, but he does a fantastic job, no pun intended, differentiating himself from Eccleston's portrayal.
mm,
You know, because like the way that he sort of talks to, uh, the people around him, the way he sometimes goes kind of high pitched when he's excited.
mm,
Like the Mickey, hello, that kind of
yeah,
stuff. Like
yeah,
there's no way Eccleston would ever do that.
no,
Um,
no,
but all the same, like you can still tell it's the same character throughout the whole thing, and a lot
mm,
of this has to come down to RTD's writing as well, because
yeah, yeah, of course,
he does a great job in this, setting up what makes this Doctor different, what makes this Doctor the same. Uh,
mm.
yeah, it's just really really good.
I
Like,
and I, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
well, it's great how sort of like the last 15 minutes of this becomes really kind of like a tour de force where it's
Yeah,
like
sure,
we've dealt with how this is all affecting our minor characters, how they're coping without the Doctor being there, which will become incredibly important for Harriet, and we'll touch on this in a bit.
mm,
But to then switch it up immediately and just go, and now here's the new Doctor, everyone, and we'll see how he's going to pick up a sword and he's going to fight the Sycorax, and he's going to be enigmatic and he's going to be whimsical and he's going to be dark
mm,
and he's going
mm,
to be accommodating and he's going to be angry. He
mm.
sort of runs through all of the he sort of runs through the entire personality of the Doctor bingo card in just the 15 minutes at the end of the episode.
Yep, and look, as much as because as I've said, Tom Baker's my favorite Doctor. But if you compare this story to Robot, which I mean we haven't reviewed it, but I know like we've seen it.
Yeah,
Um, it I honestly think that last 15 minutes has more range in terms of performance and writing than I think most of Robot has
yeah,
from memory. So the fact that both RTD and Tennant have been able to understand this character and really hone those qualities is really great. And I think with a lot of because Doctor Who is such a long running show, and the Doctor has to be the Doctor. I think it's important that a lot of the writing has to be written around the performance in a lot of ways.
yeah,
And I think what you've got is a really good collaboration between RTD and Tennant that have just forged this strong and quite a nuanced character from the get go, and in the span of yeah, it must be about 15 minutes. It couldn't be much more than that.
no,
That he's around. The fact that we go the gamut from haha funny and wacky to oh sci-fi romp gonna beat you alien get off this world to hey yay saving the day to super serious Harriet Jones you've made a mistake is really again entertaining, but just in terms of technique is just really admirable
yeah.
and just compelling.
Well, we're gonna see
Um,
it. We're gonna see it in the future, where it's like oftentimes a Doctor's first season doesn't really reflect who they end up being, And I think that is largely because when writers are taking on the Doctor for the first time, a new
Mm.
Doctor rather for the first time, they don't really know how their portrayal is going to work out, what elements of the character are going to be latched onto by the fan base, which will then
Mm.
spill over to be more emphasized in future seasons. The most dramatic
Mm.
uh, of this is Capaldi, obviously, where he's grumpy in his first season, and then he sort of lets his hair down, literally, as his
Yeah.
tenure continues on. But even Matt
Mm.
Smith, like in a lot of his first season, he's a lot more like Tennant than I think a lot of people realize. He has a lot.
Oh, I
He's
realized it.
well,
I
yeah,
realized that very well.
fair enough. But he's a lot less manic in that first season than he'll become.
Hmm.
And I think that's because, like, again, like I think a lot of the fifth season was initially planned by Moffat, assuming the Tenant was gonna stay on. Um,
Hmm.
because I think that
Right.
season was initially written for Tenant, and I think that's
Oh,
why a lot
okay.
of the guest writers in that season. I think this is especially evident with a story like the Silurian one. There's a scene in that which I remember vividly as being, wow, that is a really odd thing for Matt Smith's Doctor to do. Not in a bad way, but it's just something that we don't see him do a lot
Sure.
afterwards. But I think once people latched onto the reasons that Smith's Doctor was different than Tennant, those elements became heightened as he went on, and he became a lot more, weird and
Mm.
quirky and manic
Mm.
and all over the place, and the darker elements kind of dipped for the most
Hmm.
part, so that when they
Hmm.
reared themselves up again, they were even more dark than they had been.
Hmm.
And I think we're going to see it with Tennant as we watch his run, because even though as it is now from the Christmas Invasion, there is a stark contrast between him and Eccleston. I think that his character still has room to go, and we
Hmm.
will see it change across the seasons. He's going to become a lot more. Um, well, we see here he goes no second chances, but he doesn't really carry that on with his season. He'll become a very pacifist character. He won't tend to make that kill shot nearly as much
Mm.
as this sets him up to do. Um, he
Would he
ends up
do
doing
that in
the
later seasons?
pun.
Would he explore the darker side more in later seasons? Would you
Well,
say,
he
or
definitely. It's not so much darker side because that element is still there, and it will show up in Waters of Mars, which
Mm.
is one of his last episodes, considerably. But I'm reminded, like, especially with the no second chances, there contrasting that with his iconic "I never would" speech is
Mm.
it's kind of night and day.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, I think because even like with something like New Earth,
Yeah.
he's pretty like compassionate with Cassandra, despite the fact that she tried to kill a bunch of people the last time they met, and she doesn't seem to have
Learned her
changed all
lesson.
that
Yeah.
much.
Well, especially when
So,
you consider that the last time that he met Cassandra, he said everything has its time and everything dies. But then in New Earth, we're going to see him say to Cassandra as she's dying, "We can take you somewhere and heal you. We can find you a new body." Like he tries
mm.
to prolong her life even further when that wasn't his philosophy last time. Like because even
Mm.
from even one episode later, he's going back on the no second chances thing,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting when you think about that.
Mm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Sure, sure. Um,
Um,
hmm.
but yeah, I mean, it's a fine enough introduction. Tennant's giving it his all. Um, we've mentioned it here and there. Do you want to talk about the Harriet Jones of it all?
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Because it's quite a wonderful kind of final twist in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
because
in the end.
honestly, for a huge chunk of the episode, it doesn't have to be Harriet.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, it could just be
Yeah,
like
like
any
it could have
old.
been somebody else.
It could have been a unit higher up. It could have been anyone. But
A
it,
new PM.
yeah. But it being Harriet makes the ending so much better. You
Yeah,
know, and
for sure.
something I want to highlight is Penelope Wilton's performance because
Mm.
you can see in the moment when she's like, "Tell Torchwood to fire."
Mm.
You can see what she's thinking, and she's thinking,
Mm.
"I know it's the right thing to do, but he will not like it, and it will
Yeah.
cost me this friendship, and I'm devastated, but I'm sticking by my
Mm,
decision.
yeah,
It's
it's very
such
much a
an
crossing the
interesting
Rubicon moment.
character. It's so good.
It is. It's. I think you once mentioned something that you really like to see in not just Doctor Who, but most forms of fiction, is when you have a character who's got like a really strong sense of morality, and it's often like a strong sense of duty, and they want to do the right thing, but they wind up doing like the wrong thing, and I think that's quite clear with what's happening with Harriet Jones here.
Well,
And I
that's the
think you're
thing
right
because
to
you
point out that you definitely need to have seen Aliens of London World War Three to get the full impact. Because if you haven't seen that, you won't really understand what
well,
a
yeah,
massive, well, not really turnaround, but like what a
no,
big character progression this is for
yeah,
her.
it makes the fallout so much more tragic when they're arguing and Harriet's giving her side, and you're like, she's right.
Mm.
Like you can't like it's obviously a drastic step to genocide the Sycorax, but when she's describing like you're not here all the time, I saw two people die in front of me and you were taking a nap. It's hard to say it's hard to call it a villain turn because it's not. Like it's someone that has carefully considered the situation, taken a stand, taken a step that she believes to be the right move, and explained it knowing full well that the morals of the Doctor won't allow for it, but standing by
I
it regardless. And again, like it's hard to say that she's wrong about what she did.
I might disagree there. I think there's obviously that conflict, which is really good that they're highlighting that yeah, like it's like he's doing a bad thing, but it's understandable. But I think ultimately, I am certainly on the Doctor's side here.
Well, it's
The
interesting
like the
that
fact is, even if there's seemingly justification for this, she's doing it out of sense of fear and compassion for her fellow species. That's just part of the problem. Uh, you know, it reminds me. This is a weird thing to bring up. There's a song called "For What It's Worth" by I don't know why I'm not remembering who it's by, but song from the 60s, like a protest song, and there's a line that goes, paranoia strikes deep, into your life it will creep. And I think that sort of thing is highlighted here. So when the Doctor says, I should have told them to run and hide because the monsters are coming, the human race, I do kind of agree, because even if there is seemingly moral justification for this, it still leads to that devastating impact. And
well,
like, who is
put it
who is Harriet Jones to decide this?
well, it's
Who
interesting
who is
that the
she to
next
decide all these people should die?
well, it's interesting
Um,
that the next time we see Harriet, she's almost proven right because the next time we see her, it's in the Stolen Earth, and
mm, mm,
the Earth is captured by Daleks. The Doctor's not there, and Harriet straight up says, I told him that a day would come when the Earth would be in danger and he wouldn't
mm,
be there.
mm, mm.
And she's right. Like I don't necessarily like. I don't want it to sound like I agree with what she did. I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
Genocide is awful. But when she's like, they would leave and tell others of the Earth. In that case, we need a deterrent.
Mm.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say she's objectively. It's not, again, it's not a villain turn. This isn't Harriet. Uh, you know, turning around and going, "Meh, I'm the season 2
No,
villain,
no, no, no.
everyone. The next season is
And
going to be about my tyrannical rule of Britain." It's just two characters that have opposing morals clash, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
can agree with one, you can agree with both,
Mm.
but the fact that there is this established history between the two, it's such a tragic way to end a Christmas special.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, it's bold. It's bold to do
Yeah,
that.
it's
Um,
incredibly bold.
and the
And
reason why I think it,
you can also argue that the Doctor, like, it's pretty harsh what the Doctor does. Essentially
yeah,
single handedly ending Harriet's rule. But like the genius of I've talked about it before, the way the Russell T Davies era meshes with itself and makes things more important on retrospect than they otherwise would be. This is the
mm.
moment that arguably created Harold Saxon.
Yeah. Now that I think about it,
Harriet Jones not being
mm,
there, such this
mm,
built up politician, architect of
mm.
Britain's golden age, she gets taken out of government, and then Harold Saxon steps in to fill the void.
Mm. Well, that's interesting. So there's a couple of things that I want to touch on there. First off, just with Harriet Jones, the reason why I think her characterization here works so well is because, like the best twists, it seems to come out of nowhere, but then when you
Yeah,
look back, oh no, this is completely consistent, and it is because when we see her in the um, Aliens of London World War Three, it shows that she's really dedicated. She's a person of the people. She wants to look after her constituents, and obviously now her constituents are all of the UK and by extension all of Earth. So
yeah,
it's a really dark turn, but no one can say that this is out of character because it's
no.
not. This is who she is and who she always has been. It's just unfortunate that it's kind of rearing its head in this way, and as you say, it's the tragedy is these clashing beliefs between the Doctor and her. So that sort
Well,
of
this is also the person that
mm,
in the same episode, she offers to make tea for someone, even though she's the prime
mm,
minister and could get someone else to do it. And it's a small thing, but the way she keeps like showing her badge and going, Harriet Jones, Prime Minister.
mm,
It's a
mm,
callback to when she would go Harriet Jones, MP, Fly Down North, at a
yeah,
time when she needed to introduce herself, and she's
mm,
so used to not being heard that she's still instinctively doing that.
mm,
It's a character affectation that I
mm,
quite enjoy. And the rule of three happens where it's like, the unit guy says it, the assistant says it, and then the Sycorax say it.
mm,
And then it's going to happen again in Stolen Earth, and she's going to twist it around into a
mm.
really bold set of final words. Um, it's a small thing that I think
Yeah, yeah.
it's another like lovable quirk of Harriet, and it makes it harder to hate her when she does do that thing at the end. Because again,
Mm,
it's just a person. It's
mm,
not a set of tropes packed into someone who it's like it's not the seedy politician. It's not the misguided uh, you know do-gooder. It's Harriet Jones.
yeah. Again, she's a people's person. She she's kind of an ideal of what I mean I assume the British people want out of a PM, someone who actually really does care about people rather than sycophants and opportunists and tyrants that have historically held positions of power. So, but seeing that even that sort of logic and that sort of morality isn't perfect, I think is really it carries a lot of weight in the end there. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to mention is we kind of we touched on the over mythologizing of the Doctor, but isn't I mean, granted, I'm going off. I think who is the YouTuber? I think it's the I can't remember his name, but he's the guy who does the He Who Moans
Oh yeah,
series. I think it's him who talked about how one of the big character arcs of not just this season but Tennant's era overall is sort of viewing the Doctor as this kind of godlike figure and him deciding, how morally right am I in making these huge decisions. But we kind of see it here. We see him again essentially toppling down a government in what's supposedly Britain's golden age, and not only do we kind of sort of in a more subtle way have to reckon with the consequences of that, but we see the direct consequences because, as you say, this gives rise to Harold Saxon. You could say that by making this big decision, he created his own, enemy and didn't even know it.
yeah, definitely. Like if he didn't fly off the handle at the end,
Mm,
Harold Saxon probably might not have come into
mm,
power. It's
mm.
it's that simple. I mean, it does. It
I
also
think,
leads to the final scene of the episode as well. It's a Christmas special. You got to have it snow. Russell T Davies loved to subvert that by having it snow
yeah,
without it
yeah,
actually snowing. In this
yeah,
instance, it's the ash from the exploding.
which is really, man, that's fucked up.
Oh no, it's incredibly fucked up. Especially when you consider that a lot of people's instincts when it starts snowing is to open their
It's to
mouth and
catch,
stick their tongue out to catch the snowflakes. That's grim.
yeah, that's like, yeah, there's oh man, that is really fucked when you think about it. Yeah, dead Sycorax. Oh man, uh, that's uh, that's uncomfortable.
Yep.
Mind you, good for RTD for being that bold and making a
Yeah.
decision that's that disturbing. But oh man,
He's like it needs to snow, but it's a cop out to just it's an overused trope to have it be it's snowing on Christmas. What a miracle!
who'd have thunk it? Um, it's yeah, it's something else. As we said, a lot of like the really good ideas, not just ideas, but like the way that they're put together, it all comes together in that last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I feel like this episode is kind of worth it even for those last 15 minutes.
Well,
Um,
it's also nice to see the Doctor like sitting down for Christmas dinner with Mickey,
mm,
Rose, and Jackie. Especially when you consider that
mm,
the last time he was offered that, he just decided to leave.
mm,
There's the classic line. My mum's cooking. Good. Put her on a slow heat and let her simmer. He's like, I'm not a family guy. I don't do families. I'm gonna go. And
mm,
now to see this new Doctor sitting around a table, opening up Christmas crackers, enjoying a
mm.
family meal, basically. I think that's probably the biggest uh, sign of how much this new Doctor has changed. But I honestly
Yeah.
think that post Time War arc, it's something that Nine would also have done. He's
Mm.
starting to open his heart up again. It's kind of like it's weirdly it is kind of like a Scrooge thing in a weird way.
Do you mean his hearts?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely starts. Um, yeah, I mean, you get the Christmas music playing at the end. It's so weird to switch from this really intense fallout with Harriet Jones to whimsical Christmas music, and we're all like
Mm,
laughing and cheering, and the Doctor's picking his new
mm,
outfit. It's kind of weird tonally to whiplash
mm,
it like that, but it's a Christmas special. It's whatever.
yeah. Yeah, fair enough. You gotta have that, that happy ending in the end.
Yeah.
But it still works pretty well because again, going from the tonal whiplash from war crimes to Christmas times. Anyway, yeah, going from one to the other it's bold.
Hmm.
And the fact that RTD was able to pull it off as well as he did is really admirable. So good for him.
Let's score this thing.
Sure. Um, look, having it's tough because I almost want to say it's an 8 simply because of those last 15 minutes because they are doing so much, but we've also got this whole other part of the story which has quite a lot of flaws. So like not heaps of flaws, but some flaws.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with a 7, sure.
Me too. I'm at a 7 as well.
Yeah.
Amazing last 15 minutes. Incohesive first 10 minutes. Rose is being obnoxious and annoying. Um, a lot of the minor characters, while good, are kind of forgettable. Like we didn't even touch on
Mm.
the guy who put A positive blood on the space capsule and his
I
whole
didn't mind him.
discovery.
He was
I
kind
didn't
of
mind him, but I'm
funny
not.
and
No, I didn't mind him. He was good. I'm not going to think about him after we have this discussion, but I didn't mind
mm,
him.
mm.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I think we're both at a 7.
Yeah, 7.
Awesome. Well, like I said, this was a Christmas special. Happy Christmas and happy holidays to everyone who happens to be listening.
Yes, from all of us here to Who's Review, Merry Christmas and a Happy Who Year.
Happy Who Year. Speaking of the Who Year, we're going to be back in the new year with uh, continual episodes. We're back on a consistent release schedule. Fingers crossed, assuming nothing happens to derail us. And the next episode we're going to be discussing, it's a big one. We're going to be looking at Genesis of the Daleks.
Oh boy.
We're kicking off the 60th anniversary year of Doctor Who with perhaps the most famous classic Who story of all time.
That honestly, that's probably pretty fair estimation. It'll be very interesting. So tune in.
Until then, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and ho ho ho. Look, you already said Happy Who Year. I had to do something.